Hey everyone, Shaun Stevenson here, author of the Throne series, and today I have been seeing on my Facebook page some ads for a book series that I was intrigued by, and I liked the look of them. They look like they were an early middle grade reader, and I like to read middle grade and YA books. That's like my jam. And so I thought, let me check these out. They're a Christian series, and I thought, well, I like to read those and see what's going on. So I decided to go to my local library and pick up a copy of The Secret of the Hidden Scrolls, book number 1, The Beginning, by M.J. Thomas. Now, this book, I got some issues with it. Let me start off with the positives, and then I'm going to talk about why I think this book actually does not work on a fundamental level. So, first of all, this book is about two kids, Peter and Mary, and they are going to stay with their great uncle Solomon, who is an archaeologist. He's now retired. He has a very odd, weird house with lots of old stuff and old rooms, and it's like kind of a, that exploratory kind of place, like the Scrooge McDuck mansion, where there's just like odd things everywhere, and it's a big, huge mansion. And so they're staying with great uncle Solomon for a month while their parents are gone. I don't really know where. I don't think they really ever said exactly where the parents were going, but they are staying with their great uncle Solomon. And they find out that there is a hidden room, a hidden library in great uncle Solomon's house. And when they go, after hearing the roar of a lion from the room, they find this mysterious pot of glowing scrolls that all are sealed with little symbols on the wax. And great uncle Solomon tells them that he has not been able to open any of the seals, and he's wondering who would be the chosen ones, to open the seals and see what the scrolls say. And so Peter and Mary, they kind of accidentally break open a scroll and suddenly find themselves traveling back through time to the beginning. They go back to Genesis 1, to the creation of the world according to the Christian view of what happened in the creation story. Now, it is a particular view of what happened in the Christian story in Genesis chapter 1, and I will explain a little more about that in a minute. But they go back in time and they are seeing creation happen day after day, all these 7 days, and they only have 7 days to figure out the secret of the hidden scroll, because there are words written on the scroll that they can't figure out, and they have to in order to get back to their own time, or they'll be stuck in the past forever. So this series is kind of like a Magic Treehouse kind of vibe, where you have these kids that are going back in time to different historical events to see what happened. Only in this series, they're all biblical stories that they're going back in time to. So Peter and Mary, they go back in time to the creation story. Now, amongst Christians, there's a lot of discussion about what exactly the Genesis chapter 1 story means. Some people hold to a very literal reading of Genesis chapter 1 and think that it's exactly what it said, like day 1 was light, and then day 2 was sky, and day 3 was land, sea, and plants, and those are like 24-hour days, and that the earth, as we know it, is only about 6,000 to 8,000 years old. It's not that old according to this viewpoint. There are also other Christians who have other views that God created and had more time in between the things. There are also views of God using what's called theistic evolution, where God is the one who set all the stuff in motion, and then evolution took the processes throughout each of these days. In the days, it's more like poetic. Here's the thing. No matter what side people fall on when they're reading these kinds of things, I will say it's a hotly debated topic amongst Christians about whether it's a creation that's the literal 24-hour days, or whether it's an evolutionistic style where things happened in the billions of millions of years and God was the one kind of organizing what happened. They all agree on that God is the creator in this viewpoint. So no matter what view you have of this, what we do know about Genesis chapter 1, either way, is that it is written in a poetry style. And it's not written in a typical narrative format in the original Hebrew that the Bible was written in. So, okay, I'm a children's pastor, and I have a master's degree of divinity, so let me just get a little nerdy for a second. So the Bible was written in 3 languages originally: Hebrew, Aramaic, and Greek. The first part of the Bible, what's known as the Hebrew Bible or the Old Testament, was written in Hebrew. And in Hebrew, Genesis chapter 1 is not written in a narrative style. It's written as poetry. So a lot of people take that to mean it might not be a literal 24-hour set of days that is being talked about, but it's a poem and describing the things that God does, explaining who God is. Part of the problem with a lot of creation stuff is that today, a lot of Christians want to look back at the creation story in Genesis chapter 1 of the Bible and read it from a scientific lens and asking scientific questions that we ask today, like how did this work? How did this happen? What are all the details of this? Whereas the people who wrote Genesis chapter 1 back then, they did not care about those sorts of questions. Their questions were, who is God and how does God relate to people? So, in this story, it takes the view of the 24-hour literal days and takes Peter and Mary back to it. Now, I have seen some intense backlash against this book online. Like, I'm talking some really intense, super long Goodreads reviews that are 1 stars, and if they could have given it 0, they would have. And one particular criticism of this book is that in this book, when Peter and Mary go back in time, they meet Michael the Archangel, who kind of helps them at the beginning, because when on day 2, when God creates the sky, there's like just ocean water everywhere, and then there's sky, and the 2 kids are in the water, and they don't have anywhere to go because there's no land yet, because that happens on day 3. So Michael the Archangel shows up in a boat and helps them out. And I remember this one reviewer was very upset there was a boat that was there because they thought, trees haven't even been invented yet, and God hasn't made the trees, so how could they make a boat? They don't even know how to make boats yet. And so it was this whole long thing. So I had to take a second and say, okay, this is obviously creative liberties this person is taking with this Bible story. They're trying to convey the information, explain the story, and that is the point of the book. This book falls into the trap, of my opinion, of being first trying to communicate some kind of an idea or moral or biblical story instead of creating a good story. So here's the deal. This book, this is a slight spoiler, I guess, because I don't know if it counts as a spoiler or not. But in the end, on day number 6, according to the 24-hour viewpoint of creation, that is when humanity was created. So the first person, the first man, the first woman. And in the beginning, the first man and the first woman did not wear clothes, according to Genesis chapters 1, 2, and 3. And so these 2 kids from modern day who have traveled back in time, Michael the Archangel tells them, we need to hide in the bushes in order to stay hidden because they can't see you, otherwise you'll interrupt the timeline. So they all hide in the bushes and they see the creation of the first man and the first woman who do not wear clothes. And I think this is where there's a fundamental problem with this book. On one hand, you can't describe that to a book for, 1st to 3rd graders, maybe. Even, 3rd grade might be too old for this book. You can't really describe that and explain that in this story because that would make it kind of weird for a little kid. And you can't really just ignore it and say it didn't happen because it did, according to the Genesis 1, 2, and 3 story. So, on the whole, this book is actually kind of fundamentally flawed because you have a situation like that where these 2 kids are seeing something that, according to a modern sensibility, would be pretty obscene and for kids to see. So it's kind of an odd story to have the kids be part of and to have them there for that moment when I think they could have left before that. Or they could have just jumped up later to maybe meeting Adam and Eve after the whole fall story in Genesis chapter 3, where they have clothes on now and they have left the Garden of Eden. It's kind of a little odd. Also, I do agree with one reviewer who said, wait a minute, if they go back before the world was created, there's no air. So how are they breathing and just floating around in the nothingness? And I thought, yeah, that's actually a good point. So this book is kind of fundamentally flawed from the outset. Also, I just gotta say, The characters are kind of bland. There were a couple of funny, humorous moments that I thought, okay, that was not bad. I liked that humor. But then there was a lot of like just bland characters who kind of just go through the motions of each thing. There was some legitimate danger though, and I appreciated that moment. When they're in the water and they're swimming and they feel like they can't swim anymore. There's also a scene with some sharks and a rhinoceros that I thought those were all really well done. And I feel like MJ Thomas definitely has an ability to write. I just kept thinking, I wish there was a few things that you had thought about a little deeper with this book than what we've got here. So, in the end, this book, in my opinion, is a little bit flawed. Is it going to be a problematic book for kids to read? Not necessarily. If you're in that viewpoint where you think that, the creation story is 24-hour days, this is a great book for your kids. If you like that kind of viewpoint, you want to go with that, sure, this is a great story. I think people outside of that viewpoint might have some issues with it and might not like it as much. And I think too, like I said, there are some fundamental flaws with this book that I think you can't exactly ignore. So there's kind of some interesting things there that I think are going on. Also, just a side note, this is like the fourth book I've read where two kids get dropped off on a great uncle's doorstep and the parents don't come inside to see the great uncle and talk to the person who's going to be taking care of their kids. I just don't know if that's actually reality. I don't know anyone who would be like, okay kids, we're at your great aunt's house, run inside, I'm leaving, without coming in with them just to check with the great aunt and just like touch base really quick and say, hey, I'm here, I'm dropping off the kids, here's my phone number where you can reach me just to make sure you've got it, etc., etc. But instead just dropping off the kids to go inside. I think why authors do this is either they're trying to make it spooky, like in Uncle from Another Planet, the Heebie-Jeebies book that I read, that was a really good book, or in the newest Goosebumps House of Shivers book, where in book number 1, where they get dropped off at the great uncle's house in the middle of the woods. So, and I think they're trying to do it for a spooky reason there, but in this case, I just don't think it's plausible. So, yeah, it's kind of interesting. So at the end of the day, I would give Secret of the Hidden Scrolls, book number 1, The Beginning, 2 out of 5 stars. Like I said, there were some moments that I thought were fun. There was some good danger here and there. There was some good humor. But I feel like it's fundamentally flawed, at least this particular book. There are 10 books in the series, and I actually have the next 2, books 2 and 3, that I also got from the library, because these are pretty quick reads, so I can read them pretty fast. So I got books 2 and 3 as well. So I'm interested to read those to see if they're different, because they're going to go to different Bible stories that are actually not based around, like, there not being air at the very beginning of things, and like the whole first man, first woman's clothes situation. So we'll have to see how those ones are. I'm interested to read them, to check them out. Until next time, though, keep reading, everybody. Bye!